Alright, I am live. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Steven Sorensen and I am the creator of Ctruth. Welcome. I was going to do this live stream yesterday, but my cam was glitching out, so it's acting a bit better today. It's still a little glitchy. I might flicker here and there, but welcome to the stream. This is my series that I'm doing on Fomenko's new chronology and examining the narrative in it to see just exactly how much of it is true, or not true, but I'm using the words supported and contradicted. So if you watched the first one, you know that Chapter 1, Part 1 had 100% support. So right now I've got the grading system going on, Fomenko's new chronology, even though it's still in the very early parts of the very first book, it's 100% accurate. That's going to change after this video. It's going to drop down to, I think, around a 92. So before I get into that, I just want to give a thanks to all of my patrons here. Thank you for your continued support in my endeavor here with Ctruth and trying to figure out what really is the true history of humanity. And I wanted to give a special thanks to SB Alger, who has been giving me some shout outs on social media. He is the host of the RX Picture Show, so if you enjoy my content, maybe check his out. He's been a huge advocate for me, and I appreciate his help as well. So let's get into this and pull this up. Alright, if you watched the first video, you already know how this goes, but I've got to explain it real quick. I've got two windows up. It's a long article. This video is going to be much longer than the first part. The first part had 6 claims to analyze. This part had around 40 claims to analyze. So on this web page, I will have the claims up, and then this one I will do checking the narrative. So just to summarize the findings here, in case you don't want to watch it all and you just want the data, you can go to this link. I have it in the description so that you can find it quick and easy. Here I have the final grade at the bottom. So for chapter 1.2, he got a 91.42%, which is an A minus. It's still pretty good. It's an A minus. Not a B yet though. And Fomenko's overall grade, so combining part 1 and 2 for a complete grade, it raises it up to a 92.68%. So let's go ahead and dive into this, because this will take a bit. The first one had 6 claims. I think the video was like 20, maybe 40 minutes long. And this one, I'm expecting it to be maybe like an hour and a half. So claim 1. The chronology of ancient and medieval history in its present form had been created and, for the most part, concluded in a series of fundamental works of the 16th to 17th century that begins with the writings of Josephus Justus Scaliger, called the founder of modern chronology as a science by the modern chronologist E. Bickerman. So let's check it out. Is that true? Yes, or it is supported. So Fomenko's citation, and I botched the apostrophe there, but Fomenko's citation is number 72. So Elias J. Bickerman's Chronology of the Ancient World, published in 1975. I don't have access to it. I found the 1980 edition. Basically, they're the same. The page numbers are a little bit off, and the words are a little different, but they're basically the same book. And so the 16th and 17th century works that he mentions are those by Scaliger and Petavius, which are basically still the basis for chronology today. So Fomenko says that, for the most part, concluded in a series of fundamental works with Scaliger. Here is Anthony Grafton's commentary that I have on my reference number 3, pages 77 to 78. Grafton is one of the, if not the world's most foremost scholar on the life of Scaliger. And he says, Scaliger performed bibliographical and philological miracles and used their results to create a coherent, solid structure, basically the one that scholars still use. And so that is the support that I have for claim 1, that yes, it was basically concluded with Scaliger, and Scaliger is the founder of the system that we still use today for the most part. There have been some edits here and there, but the overall gist of chronology was established by Scaliger. So claim 2 is Fomenko goes and he lists what Scaliger's works are, and he reported the titles and the publication dates correctly. So I say supported for that. So that's 2 for 2 so far. Claim 3 is supported. Let's check out what it says. For the most part, the body of Scaliger's work was concluded by Dionysius Petavius. The best known book of the latter is titled De Doctrina Temporum in 1627. So this could technically be 2 of the 2 claims, but I have it set as 1. And occasionally you might pick an issue with how I've gone through and done this, and I would invite you to conduct your own investigation and establish your own grade and do something similar to what I'm doing. But for now, this is how I've done it. And so claim 3 is just 1 claim, and I say it's supported. Scaliger's work was basically enhanced and replaced by Petavius, and Fomenko also properly cites the title and publication date for Petavius's work. And here's another quote from Grafton, who says, and Scaliger's version of it, though powerful and provocative, lasted no more than a generation, since his Jesuit rival, Denis Batal, replaced his work with a more user-friendly, less idiosyncratic synthesis. And so Scaliger's work, even though it's the basis of Petavius's work, it was more user-friendly, less idiosyncratic. So it was more appealing to the common person because they could wrap their heads around it easier. So claim 4 is that Gerard Friedrich Müller revised the Russian history and chronology in the 18th century in accordance with Scaliger's scheme. And I have that marked as supported because Müller did write a history of Russia, and he's still recognized for his contributions to Russian history today. And he was among the very first people to have written a overall history of Russia in light of Scaliger's chronology. Claim 5. This is a lengthy one. Let us mention the works of the 18th to 19th century, which contain a great array of factual chronological data, such as the 4 that he lists right there. So I pulled those up in the response. They are of great value to us, since they provide a snapshot of the state of chronology during the epoch of a greater proximity to Scaliger and Petavius. This material is thus of a more primordial nature, not painted over by latter cosmetic layers. It must be noted that this series remains incomplete, as well as several other similar chronological works. To quote the prominent contemporary chronologist E. Bickerman, there has been no chronological research ever conducted that could be called exhaustive and conforming to modern standards. And that is from Bickerman in 1975, according to Fomenko. And I didn't go and find that quote, but I do remember seeing that in there. I just didn't include it in this article. But I would also agree that maybe to the standards of some people, but definitely not to my own standards and the standards of anybody with a critical mind. So claim 5 supported. These are the publications he lists. Ginzel is a famous astronomer who made a lot of astronomical contributions. Idler did same, not with the astronomy in the way Ginzel did, but with math and chronology. This one, I wasn't sure what it was. And then Mommsen is also a extremely influential chronologer of the time. And so these dates, they do stretch a bit. Like, he says they're closer in proximity, so I was a little hesitant to grant him support for this, but technically it is true because they are closer to Scaliger than himself in the late 20th or the 21st century. So I granted it as supported. That's 5 out of 5. Claim 6 is supported. Claim 6 is Hence, it would be correct to call the modern consensual chronology of the classical period and the Middle Ages the Scaliger Petavius version. We shall simply refer to it as Scaligerian chronology. And I have that as supported because, yes, the Grafton's quote shows that even he agrees that Scaliger's system for chronology is still basically the one that's used today. Claim 7 is the ground-laying works of Scaliger and Petavius of the 16th to 17th century present the ancient chronology as a table of dates given without any reasons whatsoever. Claim 7 is supported, and I say this because Scaliger and Petavius' reasoning was fundamentally a collection of appeals to tradition, which is appealing to the authority of other authors without ever confirming whether or not they were legitimate, if they were authentic and real to be using. And so appeals to tradition, I say that because it's basically saying, well, this guy said it, and so it's, it's always been this way, everybody's thought this, without ever actually determining if it has been that way. So claim 8 is, it is declared to have been based on ecclesiastical tradition. This is hardly surprising, since history has remained predominantly ecclesial for centuries, and for the most part was written by the clergy. So we've got the claim 8. It's complex. I split it up into two parts. The first part is supported. It's well known that Scaliger and Petavius were religious and based their chronologies on ecclesiastical tradition, so on the Bible and church tradition. And then claim 2 is unsupported. I'm leaning towards contradicted because it seems like he got the publication date wrong for this work. This work does exist, but it wasn't published until a bit later, until 1983, so I'm not sure what Fomenko was referencing. Maybe there's a Russian version that came out and I was looking at the English one, but I have it undetermined because I couldn't tell for sure. Claim 9 is supported. I reference 3, page 83, so that's Grafton again. Today it is believed that the foundations of chronology were laid by Eusebius and Jerome, allegedly in the 4th century AD. And yes, that Grafton does support that. So claim 10 is, it is worth noting that Eusebius of Caesarea is painted in typically medieval attire of the Renaissance epoch, most probably because he had lived in that period of time and not any earlier. This one I have it as complex but marked undetermined because Eusebius is shown in Renaissance attire, but the probability that he's actually from that time is based upon Fomenko's new chronology, which is what I'm working on validating. And so until I can validate it as being legitimate or invalidate it as being illegitimate, then I'm leaving it as undetermined because it's dependent upon the results of my study here, or anyone else's study into the validity of Fomenko's new chronology that completes theirs before I complete mine. So claim 11 is, despite the fact that Scaligerian history ascribes Eusebius to the 4th century AD during the years 260 to 340, it is interesting to note that his famous work titled The History of Time from the Genesis to the Nicene Council, the so-called Chronicle, as well as the tractate by St. Jerome, weren't discovered until very late in the Middle Ages. So claim 11 is also complex and split into two parts. The first part deals with Eusebius, the second part deals with Jerome. So claim, they're both supported. The earliest of any of the surviving manuscripts for Eusebius date to the 10th century, and they themselves appeared out of obscurity later than that. And then there's also some Syriac manuscripts that date earlier, but their provenance is even more obscure than the ones dated later. And so I have reference 14 if you want to look into that more. Claim 2, I've spent some time looking into Jerome's manuscripts, and their histories are incredibly obscure, especially for his chronicle. I'm willing to change my mind on this if someone provides an explanation as to why claim 11.2 is contradicted, but it does appear that both these characters did surface out of obscurity in the later Middle Ages, or even early modern time around the Enlightenment. So claim 12, apart from that, Historians say that the Greek original is only available in fragmentary form nowadays and is complemented by the ad libitum translation made by St. Hieronymus or St. Jerome. So claim 12 is supported. I marked it supported because of the quotes from Schaff. I thought I saw a quote that contradicted it, but when I went to try and find it again, I was not able to. I thought I saw a quote that says that the Greek literature is extant and that it's not just fragments, but I looked high and low for that quote again. I didn't save it when I saw it, and then when I went back to look, I did find stuff that supported Fomenko's claim and not anything that contradicted it. So Fomenko cites this work, 267. I wasn't able to locate that, and so maybe he was referencing the thing that I got from Philip Schaff, because it kind of says the same thing and it was published in the same day or in the same year. So potentially it's supported by this one. It says, the work of Africanus is no longer extant, and that of Eusebius was likewise lost for a great many centuries, being superseded by a revised Latin edition issued by Jerome. And they were, Eusebius was a contemporary, or he was right around the same time of Jerome, and so for it to be lost for many centuries, I think that would again go to support the idea that Eusebius wasn't discovered until much later after his supposed lifetime. And then the other quote that I grabbed from Philip was, this, together with numerous Greek fragments preserved by various ancient writers, constituted our only source for a knowledge of the original work until late in the last century. An Armenian translation of the whole work was discovered and published in 2 volumes by G.B. Ocker in Venice, 1818. So this is the supporting claim. The Greek fragments were our only source of knowledge for the work, and this is in 1890. So claim 12 is supported. I gotta take a quick sip of water while I'm doing that. Let me know where you're watching this from, how you found this stream. I am interested in hearing how you found my channel. Other than that, let me know what you're thinking about this so far. Do you think I've done a thorough job? Is there anything I could do better? So I will be right back. Okay. Claim 13. Mark the fact that Nicephorus Callistus attempted to write the new history of the first 3 centuries in the 14th century, or revise the history of Eusebius, but he could not do more than repeat that which was written by Eusebius. I say it's supported. Callistus did make an edition of Eusebius in the 14th century, and it doesn't look like he added much to it beyond Eusebius's own writings, and I have citation number 9 to support that. I haven't been able to view Fomenko's source, so I'm skeptical as to how supported claim 13 is, but it does appear to check out from other sources. Claim 14 is, however, since the work of Eusebius was only published in 1544, that is, much later than the writing of Nicephorus, one has to wonder, could the ancient Eusebius have based his work on the medieval tractate by Callistus? And so for 14, I ignore the question, because that's a question and not a claim, and so the work of Eusebius, it was published in 1544, and Nicephorus did publish in the 14th century. So the first printing was in 1544. The rest of the quote is just a question. Claim 15 is supported. Let's just check out what it says real quick. It is assumed that Scaligerian chronology was based on the interpretations of assorted numeric data collected from the Bible. Certain basis dates that were used as reference points originated as results of scholastic exercises with numbers. And that is supported. It is true. Claim 15 is supported. Scaliger's chronology was based upon the works of Mercator, Funk, Crucius, and Galerianus, all of which ran numerical exercises for their chronologies based on information from the Bible. And Scaliger also indulged in these numeric exercises. So here's a quote from Grafton, reference number 10, page 88. Neither Bowden nor Mercator believed that chronology should rest on astronomical and historical evidence alone. For both men, the Bible, properly understood, provided almost all the solid information about the first 3 millennia or more of human history. And so it wasn't only on astronomical and historical evidence that they built their chronologies, but it was through using the properly understood biblical information that they could calculate when these important events had happened. Claim 16 says, for instance, according to the eminent chronologist J. Usher, the world was created on Sunday, the 23rd of October, 4004 BC, in the small hours of the morning. Mind-boggling precision. It's supported. Fomenko quoted Bickerman. Here's a quote from Bickerman that I found, which is very similar to the one Fomenko provided. What am I looking at here? Claim 16? Yes, claim 16 is supported. Usher did. That is the proper date that Usher calculated. So I have a citation there to support that. Claim 17 is also supported. It says, one is to bear in mind that the secular chronology of the present days is largely based on the scholastic biblical chronology of the Middle Ages. E. Bickerman, a contemporary historian, is perfectly right to note that the Christian historians have made secular chronography serve ecclesial history. The compilation made by Hieronymus is the foundation of the entire edifice of Occidental chronological knowledge. And that is supported. Here's the one that is saying it, using the works of their predecessors. The Christian chronographers put secular chronology into the service of sacred history, which is that history of God. And Jerome's compilation became the standard of chronological knowledge in the West. And this again goes to further reinforce the earlier statements that Eusebius and Jerome they basically laid the foundations for chronology until Scaliger and Petavius came along and replaced those. Claim 18 reads, although Joseph Scaliger, the founding father of modern chronology as a science, had attempted to reconstruct the entire tractate of Eusebius, as E. Bickerman tells us, the datings of Eusebius that often got transcribed erroneously in manuscripts are hardly of any use to us today. Alright, let's see if that checks out. And it does. The datings of Eusebius, often transmitted incorrectly in manuscripts, are of little use to us today, except in a few cases where no better information is available. So, basically, he's saying that they're just the last resort. We got nothing else. We got to use them. is the message of that. So, claim 19 and 20 are both supported and discussed by Petrides, I'm not sure how you say that, in reference 12 there. So, quick just to read through that. Due to the controversy and the dubiety of all these medieval computations, the Genesis dating, for example, varies greatly from document to document. And I wish I would have pulled this up sooner, but let me just show you some of the variations in the Anamondai dating. Here we go. Oh, oops. Alright, so this is my website. If you go to the homepage, it's every other one of these has the search bar function. Every page except for the homepage has that search bar function. Now, this is my article on the Anamondai Datings. It's the reference list that I created so that I can see exactly what all of them are and who created them. So the second part has all the datings. You can see, what was the quote that I just read? Yep, vary greatly from document to document. And so here we have Alfonso X dating it almost to 7000 BC. You got these are all contemporaries. Here's some people from the Renaissance. They date it to around 4000 BC. Then on the bottom of the scale, we've got Stephen Bateman, who is a contemporary of Matthew Parker, the person that the Parker Chronicle is related to. He dates it to kind of close to 4000. Rabbi Lippmann is the youngest one, who dates it to around 3600. So 3600 to 7000 about. Yeah, Yeah, that's quite a bit of variation, I would say. So that's supported. And then claim 19, the correct Genesis dating issue was far from being scholastic and had been given plenty of attention in the 17th to 18th century for good reason. The matter here is that many ancient documents date events in years past since Adam, or since the Genesis. And I think that they consider both of those to be the same because Adam was created in the first week of the world being created, and so the creation of the world is synonymous with the creation of Adam. And this quote goes on to say, this is why the existing millenarian discrepancies between the possible choices of this reference point substantially affect the datings of many ancient documents. So depending on which document you're looking at, if it says 800 Anamondai, that could put you anywhere between around 6200 BC or around 2800 BC. So that is quite a difference there. We are on claim 21. This is the first one that I've got that is contradicted. Scaliger, together with Petavius, were the first ones to have used the astronomical method for proving, but not examining critically, the late medieval version of the chronology of the preceding centuries. So I'm a bit skeptical on this. It might be supported, but I think there's a case to be made that it's not. As mentioned earlier, Scaliger built upon the astronomical methods developed earlier in the 16th century, so they were definitely just being created, and things like that were starting to happen. And I think that that's a bit lesser known fact. So I don't really blame Fomenko for pinning it on Scaliger. Scaliger definitely was the first to receive significant attention for this. I think when people think of Mercator, they think of his map work and not his studies into chronology. So I have it contradicted for now, but it's not like it's a huge deal. It's just historical narrative, and Fomenko isn't technically academic historian. He definitely has spent a good portion of his time looking into history, but when writing historical narrative, it's good to keep in mind that it can change with new evidence that is brought up. So claim 22 I have marked as supported. It says modern commentators consider Scaliger to have ipso facto transformed this chronology into a scientific one. This scientific veneer proved sufficient for the chronologists of the 17th to 18th century to have invested unquestioning belief in the largely rigidified chronological date grid that they had inherited. So I have it supported. I say this because Scaliger has been popularly viewed as the father of scientific chronology, and the overwhelming majority of chronologers did use Scaliger's chronology for the basis of their own. And there were people who were questioning it, but it was the overwhelming majority of people, and this is still the truth today, base it upon Scaligers, whether or not they're aware of that. So claim 23, on having studied the text of the Bible, Archbishop Hieronymus had come to the conclusion that the world had been created 3,941 years prior to the beginning of modern chronology. And so this is where Fomenko gets a lot of contradiction points. It is contradicted. Modern chronology was not really established until Scaliger in the late 16th, early 17th centuries, and this would put Jerome's Anamondai date around 3450 BC, which is not where Jerome places it. And I don't know what Fomenko was thinking here. Maybe it was an issue with the translators, but if the modern chronology was created by Scaliger in the early 1600s, then that's where I got that date from, and then the rest of it is also a bit weird. Claim 24 is contradicted. I found a number of websites reporting either 5529 or 5530, which is also like it's a year difference, but technically it's a contradiction because it can't be both. And so while Fomenko gives 5515, It's not that. I haven't seen that anywhere else except for Fomenko, so I have it marked as contradicted. Potentially Fomenko's source says that, but I haven't found anything to support it. I have found stuff to contradict it. Claim 25 is unsupported because it's basically just saying that St. Augustine had added another 36 years to that of Theophilus, and that could be true, but everything I found so far has just said less than 600 years, and so technically 36 plus this would fall within that, and I'm waiting to find more on that, which is why I have it undetermined. Gotta take one more sip of water. Alright, so that is claim 25. We're on claim 26. We are over halfway through. We got claim 26. Many eminent Western European chronologists of the 16th to 17th century have belonged to the clergy. Scaliger, for instance, was a theologian. Tischendorf, the founding father of paleography, was a doctor of divinity. Dionysius Petavius, a Jesuit, and an author of several theological writings. So he names a few people as examples. I went on to name a few others, such as Usher, Mercator, and Crucius, and so claim 26 is supported. Claim 27 reads, their absolute trust in the infallibility of what the ecclesial chronology told them determined their entire Weltanschauung, which is like life philosophy. Hence, their attitude to the data offered by other disciplines was determined by whether or not it could serve the advocacy of this a priori assumption, or the other, invariably based on the medieval ecclesial chronology that was later rechristened scientific. Claim 27 is supported. Grafton's commentary about how Scaliger wrestled with the conflicting evidence is a good example of the opposite, but is not a typical case. Scaliger was tempted to say the texts of Eusebius were forgeries, but he ended up granting their validity. For the most part, though, the Bible was not to be questioned, and that did play into how the majority of chronologers saw the world and wrote their chronologies. Here's a quote from Beroaldus, and it says, we have everywhere followed the authority of the Holy Scripture, which the Lord has granted us as a sure and indubitable foundation, which is one to not be questioned, and as well as the 29 fundamental points of chronology given by Petavius as well. There's commentary that those aren't to be questioned, and so really questioning wasn't very common, but I included the opposite one just because it does exist. There was a source that contradicted it, but for the most part it's accurate. So Scaliger believed the Bible to be the basis for chronology, but it needed to be interpreted in light of pagan sources. And so again, it's the Bible that's the source, the fundamental one, but the pagan sources can offer insight into the appropriate interpretation. Claim 28 reads, the fact that the clerical chronologists of the Occidental Church have deified the endeavors of their predecessors of the 15th to 16th century excluded the very possibility of criticizing the foundations of chronology in any way at all, even minutely. Claim 28 is supported. For example, Petavius's 29 fundamental points of chronology that nobody was to question, which I have an article up on my website. If you just type in 29 fundamental into the search bar, it will come up. Claim 29 is Scaliger, for instance, could not even conceive of such heresy as running a check on the chronological materials of the Holy Fathers. Scaliger calls this work by Eusebius divine. So claim 29 is undetermined because I haven't been able to review Fomenko's source. I think Scaliger might have questioned Eusebius, as for example, with maybe potentially thinking it was a forgery, but I guess that wouldn't really be questioning Eusebius, that would be questioning the authorship. And so you would keep Eusebius as a reliable source, but the writing attributed to him would be now considered attributed to pseudo Eusebius, a fake Eusebius. So I'm still waiting to determine that one. Claim 30 is trusting the authority of their predecessors unconditionally. The chronologists reacted at external criticisms very bitterly. This one I also have undetermined. I'm leaning towards supported, but I didn't think Fomenko had a good example because he was talking about Scaliger's reaction to people criticizing his mathematical claim to be able to square the circle, but not his chronology. So Claim 31 is few are aware that Scaliger and Petavius had brought chronology to perfection in absolutely precise datings, quoting the year, day, month, and sometimes even the time of day for all the principal events in history of humankind. For whatever reason, modern monographies and textbooks usually only quote the years of events according to Scaliger. Petavius coyly omitting the month, day, and hour. It is verily a step backwards that deprives the chronology calculated in the 17th to 18th century of its former splendor and fundamentality. So I have that marked as undetermined because I want some hardcore data to show that. I want to know exactly what the dates are and what I want examples to support that, so that's why I have it marked undetermined. I haven't put in the time to get all of that together myself. So Claim 32 is by the 19th century, the accumulated volume of chronological material grew to the extent of inducing respect a priori by its sheer scale. So the chronologists of the 19th century saw their objective in making minor corrections and not much else. Claim 32, I have that as supported because for the most part, no radical changes have taken place, except for the Anamondai dates that were discarded. But again, that was more for Usher, got popular for that. So Claim 32 is supported. For the most part, no radical changes were proposed to the general scheme of chronology. Claim 33 reads, the issue of veracity is hardly raised at all in the 20th century, and the ancient chronology solidifies terminally in the very shape and form given to it by the writings of Eusebius, Jerome, Theophilus, Augustine, Hippolytus, St. Clementine of Alexandria, Usher, Scaliger, and Petavius. So these are all older names, and then these are all like pre-6th century, and these are all post-15th century. Claim 33 I have as supported because even in the 21st century today, the question of veracity is nearly non-existent. I know of almost zero historians that question whether or not it's legit. They just assume it is, and then they take that stance and defend it against any criticisms. Claim 34. To someone in our day and age, the very thought that historians have followed an erroneous chronology for about 3 centuries seems preposterous, since it contradicts the existing tradition, which is supported because I think the statement is mostly true, as not everyone is just someone. Although it would be interesting to do one of those videos where you interview people on the street to ask the question and see what they say. So like maybe if I were to do like a street interview, I could get people's responses and be like, hey, do you think that historians have been following the wrong information for the last 400 years, and see what they say. But from my online interactions and from most people that I've talked to about this, it does sound kind of loony at first, but then after you dig into it a bit, it's definitely understandable that this could be the case. Preposterous. Claim 35. However, as chronology developed, specialists encountered considerable difficulties in trying to correlate the varied chronological data offered by ancient sources with the consensual Scaliger's version. It was discovered, for instance, that Hieronymus misdates his own time by 100 years. Let's check that out. It is supported. Fomenko cited Bickerman again, and here's the quote that supports his citation. Errors were unavoidable. Jerome, a chronologist himself, writing after 374 AD, congratulates a certain Paul on his 100th birthday. Yet elsewhere he states that Paul knew personally Cyprian of Carthage, who had died in 259. So while it could be considered contradicted because Fomenko said 100 instead of 115, I'm granting support because it can round down to 100, so it's about 100 years off. And it still goes to support the main point that Fomenko is making, that Jerome misdates his own time. And so it's a anachronism, I think is what that's called. Claims 36 and 37 are both slopped into one, so let's check out what that says. Here we go. The so-called Sassanid tradition separated Alexander the Great from the Sassanids by an interval of 226 years, which was extended to 557 by contemporary historians. In this case, the gap exceeds 300 years. The Jews also allocate a mere 52 years for the Persian period of their history, despite the fact that Cyrus II is separated from Alexander the Great by 206 years, according to the Scalagerian chronology. So 36 and 37 are both supported. Here's the quote from Bickerman. This lack of certainty in the matter of chronology made it possible for the Sassanid traditions to reduce the period from Alexander to the Sassanids from 557 to 226. The Jews also allotted only 52 years to the Persian period of their history, though 206 years separate Cyrus from Alexander. So Bickerman supports both of those claims. Claim 38 is supported. The aforementioned... Oh, here we go. Let me read it off real quick. The basic Egyptian chronology has also reached us through the filter of Christian chronologists. The list of kings compiled by Menathon only survived as quotations made by the Christian authors, and that is supported. The aforementioned king list of Manetho has been preserved only in Christian summaries. So that is, I still think, a big part of Egyptian history, and I think it might be Bickerman. It was someone else. I have the quote on my Fomenko studies group, but it's talking about how probably some of the people that Menathon lists as successive rulers actually ruled at the same time, and that some dynasties are phantom dynasties of the other. I don't have the quote readily available for that, but I do have it on the page if you use the search feature for that group. So claim 39 is, some readers might be unaware that the Oriental Church avoided using the birth of Christ as a chronological point of reference, since in Constantinople the debates about the date of his birth have continued well into the 14th century. And that is supported. Here's Bickerman's quote. The Eastern Church avoided the use of the Christian era since the date of Christ's birth was debated in Constantinople as late as the 14th century. So there you have it. That was the complete video version of this article in its present state. I might go back and be able to determine some of these later on, but for now the grade is a 91.42% A-. I'm saying that's decent. I think as long as you're in above 90%, that's a pretty good grade. Fomenko's overall grade is 92.68%, so that concludes all of that. Again, thanks to my patrons. If you want to check it out, I've got the link to my Patreon in the video description. I've got another series that's available on there called Killing Time, which is me exploring the stories of forgeries and hoaxes and historical fakes and discovering exactly how that takes place. So this has been Investigating Fomenko's New Chronology, Part 2. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share, comment, donate, do what you do to support, and keep your eye out for Part 3, because I will have that coming up here within the next week. So take care until then.